What's going on, guys? Welcome back to NolanTCG, and we are back here today for another month of the OCG recap. So the OCG appears to have been completely flipped on its head, fingers crossed, given that we really didn't see much branded floating through at all, especially branded Despia. It still kind of floats around as an engine, but branded Despia as a total kind of whole package appears to have been replaced by Splight. Splight is now absolutely dominating the OCG. We'll see whether or not in long term it will remain. There is typically the tendency to see a lot of flavor of the month decks popping up in the OCG, so it'll have to become a long-term trend before we can kind of acknowledge that it's a tier 1/tier 0 kind of format. But yeah, at the moment, we have Splight. It is absolutely dominating. I can't wait for it to get here because I just want to mess around with the frog package in it. But before we get started on this month's OCG recap, please remember to drop down below and hit that subscribe button if you are new here, because we are always happy to have new people on the channel. And let's get on into this OCG recap. So of course, you do see in front of us here, we have a stock standard Splight deck. Splight typically gets mixed between either the Deep Sea/Frog build, or you'll see it messed around with Evil Twin. They each do essentially the same thing. Rather interestingly, this duelist opted to side some Evil Twin stuff. I thought it was quite curious, but I guess when this special summons itself by attributing 2, you can just kind of force a bit of interaction, is the way I guess you can kind of go with it. And then you also have Trouble Sunny. So you would summon this, I guess, and then you make Trouble Sunny and then play from there? Question mark? But we'll get into this list as always. Starting us off, we do have our stock standard 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs. Then we have 3 copies of Deep Sea Diva, 1 Dupe Frog, we have the Ronin and the 3 Swap to kind of go with that whole engine. 3 copies of Effect Veiler with 1 copy of Ghost Warner and Moonlit Chill, 2 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, and 3 Maxi round out our hand trap lines. For our Splight package, we have 3 copies of Splight Blue, easily the best one. Then we have 3 copies of Splight Jet, the 1 copy of Splight Carrot, and 2 copies of Splight Red. For our spells, we have 2 copies of Call by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, I want to say Crossout Destination. 2 copies of Prosp, then our Splight spells and traps have got 1 Splight Smashes and 3 Splight Starters, and then 3 Impermanents round out the main deck. For the extra deck, we have reasonably stock standard because you're locked to level 2/Link 2 for most of this /rank 2. So you've got 1 Entus, 1 Cat Shark, 1 Zeus, 1 Downit, of course, this is just when you're ranking up from the Sky Cav. So we do have the 2 copies of Gigantic Splight, very fair card, with the 1 copy of Totally Awesome following that up. Then we see 1 copy of Hulk, 1 copy of Dark, 1 Cerberus, 1 Phoenix, 1 Almirage, and then 2 copies of Splight Elf. Then we have our side deck. Like I mentioned before, we're playing the 1 Evil Twins, Kissy Kill, and Leela. 2 copies of Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. A very good card now in the OCG if everyone is playing this stuff. 2 copies of Nibiru. 1 copy of Evil Twin Trouble Sunny. Then we have 3 copies of, again, the new Appaloosa style card. This isn't Appaloosa though, because Appaloosa is the bow, the bear is Greg, this is the goddess, and it's the new negation card for that. Then we have 2 copies of Twin Twisters, 3 D-Barrier, again, gonna be good, because Xyz still a thing, Fusion also still a thing, and then 1 Red Reboot coming through after that. We will be covering Splight later on as we get closer to the release in an OCG recap style, deck introduction episode, so do check out that when it comes, but it will be coming in the kind of distant future, once we can kind of get prepared for the deck to be releasing for us. Okay, next off we have Tearalaments, so another deck that recently released in the OCG, did a little bit here and there, mostly as like a mix into other fusion strategies. Overall, it's decently solid deck, you can't knock it, it's winning events/topping events, so you can't say it's terrible. It seems to be like the one thing that's popped up fresh out of the new weekend in the OCG, as this will be another deck that we will cover in a deck introduction series, so that'll probably come after Splight though, because Splight will be a little bit more important, it'll come first. But of course, we'll get through our deck list for this one. Starting us off, because we do mix this with branded, we have the 1 copy of Alubar, the Jester of Despia, 3 copies of Ash Blossom with the 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz, 3 copies of Maxi, then getting into our Tearalaments package, we just play a 3-3-3-3 ratio. So it's 3 copies of Halfens, 3 copies of Miru, 3 copies of Rhino Heart, and 3 copies of Shailene. Then for our spells and traps, we've got 3 copies of Branded Fusion with 2 Branded Opening, of course, our standard branded package. 2 Call by the Grave with the 1 Foolish Burial Goods, 1 Fusion Deployment, 1 Instant Fusion, and 3 copies of Flero, the Primal Parallel Ruined Realm. This is, of course, your Tearlaments spell or trap. You do have the trap as well, but this is your Tearlaments field spell. Generic deck, it could have field spell. One copy of Pot of Prosperity with 1 reinforcement to the army and 1 terraforming coming through after that. Then we see 1 copy of Branded Exile. We'll be getting this very soon for us. And then we have 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence and 3 copies of Tearlaments Salic. Then for the extra deck, of course, standard branded stuff, but you do have the extra fusions for the Tearalaments. We've got 1 copy of Abyss Dragon Alberetnus. I'm fairly sure this just got its new TCG name today, so that'll get updated. 1 copy of Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 copy of Lebellion, 2 copies of Lebellion, 1 copy of Masquerade, 1 copy of Millennium Eyes, 1 copy of Mirror Jade, 2 copies of Dragostapelia, and then a 2-2 ratio for our 2 Tearalaments. So we've got 1 Kaleido Heart and 1 copy of Kid Kalos. Then lastly, rounding out the extra deck, we have our 1 Xyz of choice. It is 1 Time Thief Redoer. Then getting into our side deck, we of course have our 2 copies of DD Crow, 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird with 1 copy of Ghost Spell, 2 copies of Nibiru with 1 Duster and 2 Lightning Storm, then 2 D-Barrier and 2 evenly matched round out the side. Okay, and lastly, we have another deck that received a bunch of new support going over the new weekend. So this is still not a top tier meta contender, but it did do well at a couple of events, so I thought I would cover it given that it did get new support to pump it up. It is Exosister. We've covered it before on the channel. We've definitely done some deck profiles, and we did a deck intro series, so the new cards actually surprisingly busted for this deck. They got very good new support in just a little bit that they got, so I'm definitely going to be playing this when it comes out. For the deck, of course, though, we do have our 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs with 2 copies of Effect Veiler, 3 copies of Exosister Ellis with the 1 copy of Irene, 3 copies of the new Exosister in Malfa, then we have 2 copies of Sophia and 3 copies of Stella, 1 copy of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit coming through after that with 3 copies of Maxi, pretty standard, like always, 3 Maxi, 3 Ash in every deck, 2 copies of Call by the Grave with 1 copy of Crossout Designator after that. Then we've got the old Exosister line in 1 copy of Armament and 3 copies of Pax, followed up with 2 copies of Overlay Network, the new XE support that they got in the OCG. Then lastly, we do have our 2 copies of Prost for our spell lineup. Then we have 3 copies of Exosister Litner. When I looked this up, I got really confused between this and the new card for Branded, because they both have like the kind of dragon that sticks up on the side here. I got really lost, and I was like, why is this playing Branded cards? But it wasn't. It's playing Exosister Litner. And then 2 copies of Vardis coming through after that. Then 3 copies of Impermanence rounding out the main deck. For the extra deck, again, it's pretty Xyz heavy, just like Fusion, like Branded is pretty Fusion heavy. Spoilers, that's what the deck does, so it's what you're playing. But for that, we do have our 1 copy of Zeus with 2 copies of a Sophiel, 2 copies of Jabreen, 2 copies of Capitel, 3 copies of Malekith. Rather interestingly, though, playing the 2-2-2 ratio on, I guess, the bad Exosisters. I would normally recommend just playing a 2-2-2 package, but I guess you're prosping away 1 of each anyway, so it's relatively irrelevant. And then we have 2 of the new 1 Magnifica. Then lastly, we have our 1 Terribly Tired tape here running out our Xyz, and then an access code and a liner for our link line. Then for our side deck, we of course have 3 copies of Contacting C, along with 3 copies of Retaliating C. Of course, this is more a bug deck than anything else when you look at it. We're playing 3 different Cs. That's busted. And then 3 copies of Nibiru coming through after that. Then for the rest of the side deck, we have 1 copy of Duster, 3 copies of Lightning Storm, and 2 copies of Dimensional Barrier. But that wraps up here for this month's OCG recap. So as always, if you do have any decks that you want me to try and chase down from the OCG for this series, do make sure to comment them down below. And as always, I've been Ben from NolanTCG, and have a good afternoon, everybody.